everyone. Welcome back inside Central Health Training Center for today's episode of Broncos Now. As always, I'm your host, Sydney Jones. And coming up on today's episode, we'll hear from head coach Sean Payton and all three coordinators as they look ahead to Sunday night's matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings. Plus, Broncos lead writer Eric DeLalla joins the show for a game preview. All that and more coming up. The Denver Broncos are set to face the Minnesota Vikings on this Sunday night football stage in just 2 days. And today we heard from head coach Sean Payton and offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi about some of the challenges on facing a team that blitzes as much as the Vikings do.
Clearly, from a pressure standpoint, if you just looked at any analytical study, there's more six-man pressure. You know, we chart if four-man's the normal rush, a single pressure would be five. There's more 6, 7 max blitzes. They come out of them. They really force your hand a little bit, and you've got to. You know, we talked about communication being important. You know, I mentioned that, man. In this type of game, I'm glad we're playing it at home. You know, because the communication obviously becomes harder on the road with the silent snap count and the gun. But you know, our tempo and then ID. But what you're seeing and what you saw and what you're discussing is absolutely true. So at first blush, you know, call it the first 6 hours, you go get another coffee and you start again. And here we are on day 2 and it gets clearer and clearer and clearer. But that being said, you know, certainly when we go through keys to victory, one of them on offense is, you know, understanding communication, knowing what we're getting out of their penny front, what we're getting out of their nickel front, and identifying, you know, what kind of pressure it is. But it can be busy and noisy when you first look at it.
It's hard first because to get the defense, the scout team defense, to simulate something as unique as what they're doing is hard. So there's a lot of frustration out there just trying to get guys lined up the right way on defense and give you the right clues. But to your point, you know, every play you've got to be, you know, a little bit like we talked about with Spags, but even more so, like every play you have to be ready for 6 guys rushing, 7 guys rushing. And so it does limit your playbook quite a bit, you know, because there's a lot of plays that are just dead a large portion of the time against this defense. So, you know, in some ways that makes it easier in that you have less to select from. You know, you're not on Amazon trying to figure out, you know, the whole world, what it is you want. It limits it. And then, you know, the communication is key, like recognizing the looks, what can happen. All right, how are we going to pick it up when they do come? What's our answers when they drop? So it's makes for a lot of late nights and long meetings.
And defensive coordinator Vance Joseph also talked about Vikings quarterback Josh Dobbs and what he's seen from him.
He's a veteran player, and he's super, super smart. I think the offense that Minnesota runs is very quarterback friendly, you know, and he's taken to it fast. They have a lot of speed. It's a good scheme for a quarterback. It's the boots, it's the play action stuff that he's very good at. He's also very good at finding an open guy. I mean, he knows where to go with the ball, you know, so he's not a young guy who's confused by coverage. I mean, he knows if it's man, taking his best matchup, he knows the concepts, he knows where his fit option is. So, you know, it won't be easy to play well against this guy because he's an experienced guy. I mean, he's been in 7 years. Sometimes we've seen it, you know, Geno in Seattle. Sometimes when guys sit for a long time, they have time to kind of, you know, figure it out, you know, and the process slows down for those guys, and they play better, you know, when they're older. You know, it's not different for quarterbacks. You know, if they all can sit 7 years, they probably all play better, you know. But he is a very bright guy, always have been athletic. He can make the second act, and that's your issue with this guy. But he's playing at a high level. You know, you can't deny that.
And looking at the Broncos, offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi talked today about the importance of sticking to the run game on Monday night versus the Bills and the success he's seen from this offensive line lately.
It helps with time of possession. You know, we weren't breaking a lot of big gains, but, you know, those 3 and 4 yard gains add up. They keep you ahead of the sticks. You know, one thing we were trying to avoid, which with the penalties we didn't do a great job, is just, you know, with that Buffalo defense staying out of, you know, the 3rd and longers. And unfortunately, the penalties kind of kicked us out. But when you're running the ball, even if it's not, you know, the 8, 9 yard gains, you're still not in 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. You know, those are the real tough downs against most defenses. It's huge. It's huge to have, you know, a really smart center. You know, he can recognize the majority of the looks. And then, you have your quarterback clued in to like, okay, this is something he can't see because he's down in a stance over the ball. And so when you see this, you let them know. So we try to take as much pressure off the quarterback as possible and that the center handles the majority of it. And then you have to recognize these outlier looks to help us out. And, and so we've got, 5 smart guys in there, like you said, that have worked together, know how to play off each other. So it's a huge help.
Plus, head coach Sean Payton talked about Russell Wilson's level of comfort in this offense and what he hopes to see from him on Sunday night.
I think he's kind of on pace. He's doing well. There's certain things he's learning. I think we're evolving a little bit relative to what we do offensively. I don't think there's any set time frame like most quarterbacks have it by. I think it's a little bit of something that moves in a direction, and it's not only just centered around the quarterback. It's also centered around who's playing running back, tight end, and receiver. And so I said yesterday at the podium, we're not, we're not a finished product yet. There's still a number of things we got to clean up, and that's why we're going out again today, and that's why we're working and trying to improve each day during the week.
Vance Joseph also reflected on Monday night's win versus the Bills and talked about what he hopes to see from this defense on Sunday.
After the game, it was obviously a good win for the Broncos. But I had 4 or 5 players come up after the game, and they wasn't satisfied. I was not satisfied. I was irritated, with how we finished the game. And I'm not going to say it was simply taking a pass game away. It was not. It was missed tackles. We were very aware that the running game was going to happen. That last drive, it was simply missed tackles. We missed 120 yards of tackles in that last drive. So my thing to our guys is we have to play our best ball in the critical moments. We can't go out there and have a great game, right? I mean, it was fun to watch. We had a great game, and now it's time to play our best ball and get them stopped, and we don't. So I was aggravated after that game, and we had a great session Tuesday morning and talked about that. But to a man in the locker room, coaches and players alike, no one was happy about how we finished. That's a good sign. That's a good sign because we are chasing perfection, and we can't finish like that. That would have been a sad story to lose that game after we played so well for 3.5 quarters, and to get to the last quarter and not tackle. Come on, stop, right? So that's not going to happen, and it was addressed. The players felt it. The coaches felt it. We had a great meeting on Tuesday morning, so hopefully that's behind us.
And special teams coordinator Ben Kotwika detailed what he saw from his unit on Monday night.
Yeah, there was a lot to unpack in that football game. Let's go to the hurry-up field goal. We call it hurricane, if you will. You can go a lifetime without seeing those, and to get really 2 of those in a game was unique. Really just proud of our guys, the way we execute. Compliment to Coach Payton. I mean, we've allocated enough time and resources, whether it's in the season here or in training camp, that they ran it really well and executed it. You spoke of the return game. Marvin, AFC Special Teams Player of the Week, well-deserved. I think he'd be the first to tell you that he tipped the hat to the guys that are blocking as well. So he's got that ability. We've kind of talked about that note throughout the course of the year. So those are the things that we're just going to continue to build on. We're going to need that to get the win on Sunday night.
Now it's time to take a look at this week's final injury report. Safety P.J. Locke did not participate in practice today, and he was ruled out of Sunday's game. Tackle Garrett Bowles, running back Samaje Perine, and guard Ben Powers were all limited at practice today, but did not receive a game status. Now joining me here inside the Broncos podcast studio for a game preview is Broncos lead writer Eric Dalala. Eric, thanks for joining me here today on this Friday.
You got it, Sid. We're trying to keep it rolling here.
Yes, we are. I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup on Sunday night, Eric. I feel like there's a lot of similarities between these two teams. I mean, both had slow starts to the season, but now we're on a few game win streaks.
Yeah, kind of the hottest teams in the league, so to speak. The Vikings have won 5 in a row. The Broncos have won 3, which is tied with the Eagles for the second longest in the league. And you're right, so the way they're winning is somewhat similar. The Vikings and Broncos have both seen their turnover differential go way up. They're starting to win these close games that they weren't winning earlier in the season. I mean, you talk about the Broncos losing early in the year to, say, the Jets, the Commanders, the Raiders. Certainly those last 2 were combined 3 points.
Yeah.
The Vikings were the same way. Their first 3 losses were all by 1 possession, and then their other losses also by 1 possession. So they've been in every football game. It should be a close game, should be exciting. They've had kind of an interesting story the last couple of weeks with Josh Dobbs coming in, learning plays on the sideline, learning the cadence on the sideline, and finding a way to go out there. And really last week, they kind of rolled a little bit, ended up being pretty close, but they jumped out to a big lead. This is a good Vikings team, a lot of playmakers on offense, and an attacking defense that the Broncos I think they'll have to really focus on protecting Russell Wilson if they want a chance to score points and win this game.
Yeah, Eric, sticking with the Vikings, you mentioned Josh Dobbs. Just looking at him the past couple of weeks, what challenges do you think he really poses for this Denver defense?
Yeah, well, he's making impossible plays happen. He's playing pretty well in the pocket, but I think it's that ability to extend plays. We've seen him run around a couple of times, dodge tackles, run for first downs, run for touchdowns. He's making plays with his legs, and which is obviously challenging for a defense, right? When you have to account for a quarterback as a passer and a runner. Yeah. We'll see if he can keep it going. He's playing really good football right now, much better than he was playing in Arizona, and I would imagine some of that is the weapons he has around him, and Kevin O'Connell as a play caller and putting him in good positions. But the Broncos definitely have to get to him and make life difficult. And be sure tacklers. You can't miss a tackle and let him run around. Those will be keys. If there's one thing maybe you can capitalize on, obviously the Broncos have forced a lot of turnovers, a lot of takeaways. Yeah. Josh Dobbs has lost a lot of fumbles, and so maybe you're able to get one or two of those, turn the tide of the game that way. But he's playing good football right now, and TJ Hawkinson, he's got him to throw to. Jordan Addison, we'll see if Justin Jefferson plays. Yeah. There's some weapons on that side of the ball.
Definitely. Yeah, Eric, you mentioned Justin Jefferson. I know he was listed as questionable, been ramping him up at practice as he's in that window right now. What would it mean if he is able to play on Sunday?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. They're undefeated with Justin Jefferson on the sideline, and he's clearly one of the best, if not the best, receiver in all of football. Yeah. A great individual playmaker. Certainly would be a test for a guy like Pat Surtain if Justin Jefferson goes up against him. LSU, Alabama battle there, right? And but sometimes you see when these guys go out, other guys are able to step up, and TJ Hawkinson's role has increased at the tight end position. He's got over 70 catches and is third in the league in receptions, on pace to break the all-time tight end single season receiving mark. Jordan Addison, as a rookie, is playing really good football. So maybe it's hard to tell exactly how it's going to play out. If Justin Jefferson returns, could mess with the flow a little bit, or it could make them even more dangerous. And so it's hard to project. What we do know is that the Broncos are preparing as if he's going to play. We've heard Sean Payton talk time and time again about that game back in New Orleans when they were preparing for the Cowboys, and DeMarcus Ware was not practicing all week, and they thought, oh, no way is he going to play, and then boom, DeMarcus Ware goes and wrecks the game. So he said he didn't make that mistake in the Super Bowl with Dwight Freeney, not going to make it again with a guy like Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, they have a lot of weapons on offense there, Eric. Looking at the Broncos offense, I know head coach Sean Payton, he talked a few times this week just about this offense not being a finished product yet. There's still a lot of things he wants to clean up and fix. So from your perspective, Eric, what are those things that you think they're really going to hone in on Sunday? Yeah,
well, I think it's important to understand it's an imperfect game. And I know it's easy when you're on Twitter to slow down a frame and say, oh, this guy should have hit this hole, or this pass was open, or whatnot, things along those lines. But it is an imperfect game. I think that's where Russell Wilson can help you sometimes, where maybe the initial play doesn't go as planned. You look at that Courtland Sutton touchdown, for example. The Broncos didn't get the coverage they thought they were going to get. Russell Wilson, Courtland Sutton are able to make something happen, and you score. So that's part of it. Certainly cleaning up the penalties is important. That's a big part, I think, that's holding this team back in recent weeks. Certainly last week, you would have had a lot more situations where it was 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, compared to these 3rd and longs that then become very difficult to convert against a defense that brings pressure. And Minnesota's defense brings pressure, more than anybody. And so being at home should help with that, just in terms of it's not the crowd noise that's going to generate false starts. From a communication standpoint, in terms of making sure the protection is right, the lack of crowd noise will help there. That ability to communicate, the lack of penalties, those are definitely two areas where the Broncos can keep getting better. And then I just think, being a little more efficient running the football. We've heard Sean Payton talk about that. Yeah. But it's a work in progress, and the Broncos are only 9 games into this, and it's they're winning right now, which is helpful. And I think Mike McGlinchey said this week, hey, it's nice that we can look at ourselves and say, we're not even close to where we want to be. We're not close to the finished product. We still got a lot of room to improve, and yet we're winning while this is happening. And early in the season, the Broncos weren't at that point. They were going through some struggles. Right. It's always great when you, in my opinion, when you're winning, but there's room to improve. Because if you go out and you win and you play a perfect game and you win by 3 points, you think, well, man, if we didn't play a perfect game, that doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room there, right? Whereas against the Bills, the Broncos made a lot of mistakes. They had 2 issues with extra points. They had the fumble. The third down and long was not great. A lot of penalties, 6 points, I believe, off turnovers, 4 turnovers. So you look at that and you say, man, there's a lot of room to clean things up here, and we still won the football game. And so from an offensive standpoint, they're still working toward that perfect game. As Sean Payton said, sometimes it's kind of like this fantasy that you're never going to quite get to, but you're always working toward it. And hopefully the Broncos can take another step. It's going to be challenging against this defense. We did hear Joe Lombardi on Friday say that with as much pressure as they bring, you almost simplify what you're doing on offense, and it makes things almost a little bit easier because you don't have to decide, can we run this play? No, hey, if they're bringing 8 guys, 7 guys, even 6 guys, we don't have time to run that. So let's simplify things and just play good football. Yeah.
Going off of that, Eric, I know this offensive line, they've had a lot of success in recent weeks. I know a couple of those guys were put on the injury report this week. Are there any concerns there?
No, it looks like everything's good to go. Knock on wood that there's no setbacks here. Garrett Bowles added on Friday with an ankle injury as a limited participant, but no game status, so he's good to go. And then Ben Powers, he was probably the big question mark of the week because he didn't practice on Thursday. He was also estimated as a non-participant on Wednesday. He returned to practice on Friday and not given a game status, which was great to see, maybe even a little bit surprising, but good to see that he's going to be available to play. This offensive line said, again, knock on wood, they've been healthy. They've started every game together. They haven't missed a lot of time. There's been very few plays where guys have had to go out. Last week against Buffalo, there's that one series where Lloyd Cushenberry left the game, but otherwise they've been there. And so when you play an attacking defense like we've talked about, the communication there is really good, being able to count on Lloyd Cushenberry to kind of dissect things. Joe Lombardi talked about we try to put a lot on the center, and then the quarterback will pick up kind of extra things. But to have guys that have played next to each other, you don't have to worry about against a good front this week and next week. You don't want to look ahead, but Cleveland's got a great defense as well. Having this offensive line have as much chemistry as they possibly could, it's a good sign, and I think hopefully it'll pay dividends this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. All right, last one here for you, Eric. Another primetime game for this Broncos team. What would it mean just to get a win to show the rest of the league, hey, this Broncos team's the real deal here?
Yeah, I think people are starting to believe and talk about the Broncos as a potential playoff contender. I think at this point, the focus has to be more internal. In terms of when you start winning football games, that's great. And you've had 2 big wins over the Chiefs and the Bills, and now you've got to figure out, okay, how do we keep this going? Because the hole that the Broncos put themselves in at 1-5, it didn't give you a lot of margin for error. And so the Broncos are 1 game away from 500. With a win, you get back to 500. You'd be right in that wild card mix. But, if you drop this here, all of a sudden you've slipped back to 4-6, and you're facing another uphill climb. And so you've got to make sure that you don't let the work you've just done, the wins you've just gotten, go to waste. And I think the way to do that is to focus internally on the process and what can we do better. We heard Vance Joseph on Friday talk about, I looked at the end of the game and I was frustrated. I was annoyed. I was irritated that we gave up a long touchdown drive, and said that a lot of players came up to him and said that wasn't up to our standard. I think that's what you want to see, the constant search for improvement. Mike McGlinchey talked about that this week of this is not the time to stop and smell the roses and feel excited about what we've done. We've got to keep going. We've got to keep working and have that internal focus, because it's great if people around the league believe, and if people on ESPN or NFL Network or whatever talk about this team and shower them with praise, but it's better to keep winning. And if you don't have that internal focus on continued improvement, you could really see this. Sean Payton talked about when this team was losing, there's a fine line between a groove and a rut. And the Broncos have moved from that rut to that groove.
Definitely.
But the fine line's still there. And so to stay on the right side of that, you've got to really, I think, be dialed in, focused. Sean Payton talked about that they've had good practices so far this week, so that's good to see. But, I think the focus has to be internal now. And maybe look back in a few weeks and say, okay, well, now we've won X many in a row. But if you don't win games like this at home, prime time, I'm sure it'll be great energy in the stadium. The place will be rocking like it hasn't. And it's a big game in terms of fan excitement and that sort of thing. So
definitely
take advantage of that, feel confident, but put the work in to make sure you're ready to get a win.
And Eric, I feel like you could feel the shift in this team the past couple of weeks that, the players in that locker room, they do believe in themselves. They do believe that they can win. And I think that's huge, going off of your point there.
Yeah, no doubt. They believe and they're confident. Again, Mike, I like Mike McGlinchey quotes. He's got the pulse of the team.
He does.
He said, the confidence in here should be at an all-time high. And that's true. They've beaten two really good football teams, won 3 games in a row. It's hard to win games in a row, but you've got to keep it going and keep the work going. And I think Russ said this week, we can't forget what got us these wins, because if you get too high and you just kind of get lost in the sauce a little bit, you're going to drop a game and then you're going to be kicking yourself. So, it should be a great environment. Hopefully these guys can keep things rolling. They're playing good football right now, and another win would erase that 1-5 start.
Yep. And the team will be in their navy blue alternate uniforms. I'm excited. I really like this uniform combination.
They're fun. I like them too.
Fun. Yeah. Well, Eric, looking forward to it. Thanks for joining the show today.
You got it, Sid.
Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Broncos Now. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in. I'll meet you right back here after the game on Monday. I look forward to it.